Hi there, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about fever in babies and children. My name is Sarah Hunstead. I am a paediatric nurse, mum of two, and also founder of CPR Kids. And what we do at CPR Kids is empower parents and families with the life-saving skills of baby and child first aid and recognition of the sick child. And I'm very excited to be here today to talk all about fever with you. What I'm going to do today is basically go through all of those facts that you need when it comes to fever. What I'd love you to do is also go back into the CPR Kids videos. We have done a whole series with paediatrician Dr. Deb Levy as well, where we go into the different illnesses, viral illnesses, all sorts of different things that will extend on what I'm talking about today. So let's start. First of all, what actually is a fever? And I want to challenge you with something today as well. A lot of people get really scared when their kid gets a fever. And, I can understand why, especially if it's the first time. But what I really want you to remember, and this is the biggest takeaway that I want you to really take from this, from the few minutes that we're here together, is that fever is not the illness. Fever is simply a sign or symptom that the child's body is fighting infection. Okay? So that's the biggest thing that I want you to take away from today. Fever is not the illness. It is the body's natural response, and it shows that the child's body is fighting off infection. So what does that mean? Okay, so let's get into a little bit more what a fever is. So I'm going to use a really simple analogy here. So for those of you who want a little more in-depth microbiology, you're not going to get it from here. But what I want you to imagine is that a virus or a bacteria or some kind of pathogen has invaded your child's body. Okay, it's in there. Your child's body goes, hang on a sec, that's not meant to be here. That's going to make me sick. And we have the same response too. And so what happens is the body starts to have this response to try and fight off the fever. It's called the immune response. And so, sorry, to fight off the fever. Goodness, I've just mucked up my words. To fight off the infection, so the virus or bacteria or whatever it is. Okay. So one of those things is that the body goes, aha, I'm going to heat myself up because I know that viruses and bacteria don't particularly like to live in hot environments. So what it does is it heats itself up to try and kill that off. So it's actually the brain that is resetting the thermostat of the body, if you can imagine what I'm trying to say there. So imagine that normally our temperature sits maybe between 36.5 to 37.5, depends on the person, depends on the time of day. So it fluctuates and, kind of does this, right? And then what happens when we've got that response to fight off the infection is the brain then goes, okay, let's take that range that we normally sit at, let's make that higher. Okay, so instead of, sitting somewhere between 36.5, 37.5, somewhere around there, all of a sudden our temperature is up. So we may fluctuate, between, 37.6, I'm picking random numbers here, maybe up to 39, maybe higher. So what we're doing is our brain is increasing that thermostat in our body, but our brain is controlling it. And so that is a good thing, okay? Our brain's controlling this, it's controlled by the body. So another thing that I want you to take away is that fever is not going to do your child any harm, okay? It's not, all right? What we worry about is the cause of the fever, okay? And also, a lot of people, I can hear some people going, hang on a sec, but if my child's body heats up too much, then they might get brain damage or they might, have a seizure or something like that. Well, first of all, fever itself is limited by the body, okay? Now, remember, the body's chosen to make that happen. Hyperthermia, which is when the heat is external. So if we imagine that that fever is controlled internally, but hyperthermia, which is external heat, that is incredibly dangerous. So, for example, a child who's been locked in a car, for example. So, yes, they can definitely become very, very unwell very quickly. They can have seizures. They can end up with brain damage. They can die from being, exposed to that heat and their body getting too hot. Fever is different, okay? So that's one big thing I want you to take away. Fever is different to hyperthermia, and fever is controlled by the body, okay? So what I also want to challenge you with there is that it's not necessary to treat a fever. A lot of beliefs out there, and because this has been passed down from our parents, from well-meaning aunts and uncles, but what we do know is that we don't need to necessarily give paracetamol or ibuprofen to bring a fever down. We don't have to bring a fever down, okay? Fever can make our kids feel miserable and they can feel like crap, and by all means, give them some paracetamol or ibuprofen according to the directions on the bottle if they're miserable and they need it for comfort. So when we treat a fever, we treat it for comfort, not to cure it, okay? So it's for comfort, not cure, all right? So before we go any further, what I want to do is talk about how to measure a temperature. Now, because there's lots and lots of different things out there. Now, what I want to challenge you on, I want to say something first before we go on to how to measure, is that it's not about the number. Okay, it's about looking at your child. Yes, we do measure the temperature because we want to be able to tell the doctor what the fever's been doing, and we're curious, we want to know ourselves. However, it's not about the number. It's about looking at your child as a whole, and I'll tell you a story about that in a moment. Now, my personal favorite way to measure a temperature on a baby is with a digital underarm thermometer, because it is cost effective and accurate. So those two things together, cost effective and accuracy with thermometers, okay? A digital underarm thermometer, they should cost, I don't know, around $15 at the chemist, something like that. And these are a really good way. The ear thermometers can be unreliable in young children. Save them for when they're older because of their tiny little ear canals. You need perfect technique. You'll probably find that if you have, an ear thermometer, that you'll get 2 different readings or 3 different readings each time you do it. And so, it's an important thing to remember that, hang on a sec, if you're getting lots of different readings, what's going on here? If your child has an ear infection, it's going to read high as well. So save them for when the kids are older. And for babies in particular, I think these things are really good. And at the end of the day, often you can feel that your child's hot. We're not feeling them here. We're not feeling them on their hands. We're not feeling them on the feet, because they can feel cool and clammy there. Whereas if you put your hand on their chest, that's where you're going to feel. So their chest, tummy, you're going to feel like, they feel like they're roasting, really. Like they do. They can feel really, really hot. So when you are measuring a temperature in your baby, okay, what I encourage you to do, and Dr. Deb Levy, who's a pediatrician, and I will be doing a Facebook Live tomorrow on hints, tips and tricks from the pediatric experts about everything from how to measure temperature to how to get your kid to blow their nose, how to get them to have medicine, all of those pediatric tricks. So tune in tomorrow at 10 o'clock as well. But quickly, in a baby, make sure that you don't get the thermometer caught up in their clothes. And what I'd recommend, and I'll go into this in more detail tomorrow, is that you pop the thermometer out the back. So here, an older baby can go with their other hand and grab it, or lift their arm up and try and grab it. When you poke it out of the back, out of sight, out of mind, okay? So we hold them, we can tuck that other arm around, and we're entertaining them until that beeps, okay? We're singing songs, we can hold, and it's a really nice way of being able to measure their temperature, okay? So there we go. I'll pop my Annie down again now. So remember, we'll go into more detail in that tomorrow, all right? And if you can't tune in tomorrow, we'll also be posting that to our Facebook pages as well, and most likely Instagram too. So we've talked about now how to measure the temperature, okay? But now just say your child has a temperature of 38. Do you have to do anything about it? Just say your child has a temperature of 40. Does that change that you now need to do something about it because it's different? So what you need to do is look at your child. And those of you who've seen my fever talk before, you will have heard this story, but it's just such a good way of explaining that it's about looking at your child. So first of all, my two kids, so they were, I can't even remember how old they are, maybe 2 and 3 at the time, or 3 and 4, something like that. And they were both sick. The youngest one was sitting on the floor in the lounge room watching Peppa Pig and asking for ice blocks. And she's saying, "More pepper, mummy." But she was normally a cyclone. She normally would have been running around. She was certainly not herself. She was quiet, but she was having oral rehydration ice blocks. She loved them. So, that's what I was giving to her. And so she was drinking well. She'd had a good wet nappy. And she was, even though she was much more quiet than usual, she was interacting, wanting to watch Peppa Pig. My older one was laying on the couch. I had to wake her and literally sit her up to give her sips of fluid. She was not waking at all to drink. I realized that she hadn't weed since the night before, and she was just she was pale, and she did not look right. She had a temperature of 38.6. My younger one had a temperature of just over 40. I think it was 40.2, like it was high. And I remember just going, whoa, okay. Who was I more worried about? I was much more worried about the child who was laying on the couch, who wasn't opening her eyes unless I literally sat her up and, trying to get her to take sips of drink, that she hadn't weed. She was pale. She was so lethargic. I was much more worried about her, even though her temperature was only 38.6, I think it was. It was in the 38s. But the other one, who was just above 40, yes, she was definitely not her normal self, definitely not. But she was still drinking. She had a good wet nappy that morning, and she was still interacting. So I actually took my oldest one to hospital because she was really unwell. She ended up having a bacterial infection that needed intravenous antibiotics. My younger one had the same bacterial infection but just needed oral antibiotics. And didn't need to go to hospital. So it just goes to show you really need not to focus just on the number on the thermometer, okay? We don't need to focus on the number on the thermometer. It is a tool that helps us understand that our child has a temperature, okay? But we need to look at our child as a whole. Really important, okay? Really, really important. Now, so what are the signs and symptoms that you need to know when to see a doctor with your child? First of all, if your baby is under the age of 3 months and they have a temperature above 38 degrees, because I don't think I defined a fever, did I? Oh, that's terrible. I was meant to do that at the beginning. So fever is 38 degrees and above measured, okay? So that's what we use. If you Google it, you'll find 7 other different numbers, but from my experience, what we use at Children's Hospital is 38 degrees and above, okay? So babies under 3 months must see a doctor if they have a fever, okay? And it's not a doctor in 3 days' time. They need to see a doctor now. And if your child is looking unwell, so if they have these signs, and this is a child of any age, not just under 3 months, but if they have a change in colour, okay? So they're more pale than usual. That's, often when we get sick, we do that. But when we really worry is if they become mottled, so they become all splotchy and marbly, or they start to turn blue. That is an ambulance, okay? Really important. But they may just be pale, all right? So they have a change in colour. They are floppy. That is an ambulance as well, okay? If they are fluffy and difficult to rouse, or they are unconscious, you are calling an ambulance immediately. Okay. However, they may also be just quite lethargic too. Okay. So my child was very lethargic. I could wake her up. She was waking her up when I was sitting to have a drink, so I didn't call an ambulance. But if she had have been more difficult to rouse, I would have called an ambulance. Okay. So we've gone through colour. We've gone through their conscious state. So are they floppy? Are they unconscious? Are they difficult to rouse? Or are they just lethargic? Okay. And then we're looking, do they have any breathing problems? If your child has got any difficulty breathing, we need to call an ambulance. Okay. Really important. All right. So what about fluids going in and fluids coming out? All right. Are they drinking well? Or are they taking half, less than half their normal feeds? That's worrying, okay? Are they refusing to drink? Are they so drowsy they're just not waking up to drink? Are they just not feeding, okay? That's worrying. And what's coming out of them? Have they got their normal wet nappies, all right? Are they going to the toilet like they normally do? Or are you finding that their nappies are just damp? Or are they much lighter than usual? Or like I saw with my daughter, I realized she hadn't weed since the night before. And, that was not normal for her at all, really not normal for her. And so all of that is really quite concerning, okay? So you can see there we've got signs that we definitely need to go to the doctor, such as our child is lethargic, they're not wanting to drink, or they're just, not having as much as usual. Perhaps the wet nappies are a little bit lighter, they're sleeping more than usual, they might be a bit pale. That's a trip, definitely to the doctor. Okay, definitely. If they're like my child, who I looked at her and I went, I'm really worried about you, I took her to the emergency department. But remember, you're calling an ambulance if they are blue or mottled. They are, they're so drowsy that you're having difficulty waking them, that they're, or if they're terrible, they're unconscious, if they're having lots of difficulty breathing as well. So they're all things that's an emergency and we need to call an ambulance for, okay? But trust your gut. I know a lot of people say, oh, when you say trust my gut, but I don't know. But that's the thing. If you're thinking, I don't know what to do here, I feel like this is really bad, then call an ambulance, okay? Then do that. Call one of the helplines, all right? Call Health Direct. They will guide you to what you need to do. But remember, breathing difficulties, difficulty rousing, all that kind of stuff, that is really worrying, okay? So, and remember, I'm going to put everything that I'm talking about here is a fact sheet from the Sydney Children's Hospital Network. I'll put that in the comments below so you have everything that I'm talking about now, okay? So when else do you need to see a doctor? If your child has also got a chronic illness, so you'll know if they have that, you'll know what your action plan is. So it's important that you do seek medical help there as well. And if your child seems like they're in a lot of pain, it's not being relieved by simple analgesia such as paracetamol or ibuprofen, then you definitely need to see a doctor as well. If your child has a rash with a fever, you need to see a doctor. If it is a rash that when you press on it and it doesn't go away, then you need to call an ambulance. I'm not going to go into meningococcal more than that, or when I say meningococcal, because I know that's what everybody's thinking. There are a lot of other different reasons why your child might have a rash that when you press on it, it doesn't go away, but it's the first thing that everybody thinks of. I did a talk not so long ago. It's in the Facebook videos, and I did that with one of the pediatricians. So please have a watch of that. It goes into much more in-depth talk. And we also did one with the sepsis team at Queensland Children's Health that goes into everything about sepsis. And we did talk about meningococcal in there as well. So please go and watch that. That will be quite helpful. I might actually pop a link to it in the comments below when I'm done as well. Okay. So if your child is, if you just know that they're not quite right, okay, please, I encourage you to go and see a doctor. All right. So when I say not quite right, there'll be a lot of you out there going, oh, I'm not sure what you mean. There'll be a lot of you out there going, yep, I know exactly what you mean. They just didn't look right. Okay. And that's an important thing that you recognize that. If they have lots of vomiting and lots of diarrhea, so more's coming out than what you can put in, we get concerned about dehydration as well. So that's another reason why you might need to see a doctor. And of course, what's really important too is that here at the moment, I'm in New South Wales, here in Australia. If your child has a fever, and a lot of the time the doctor is going to say you need to have a COVID test. That is something that I want you to speak with your own doctor about, because that is a whole other, a whole other thing. It's really difficult at the moment to be able to go and see a doctor. With that, a lot of doctors are not allowing people to come in, which is hard. I don't have the answers to this. I just don't. Unfortunately, what I encourage you to do is there are, for example, and I just need to say that we are not sponsored by Cubcare in any way. I just love the service. It might be worth doing a telehealth consult with somebody like Cubcare. What Cubcare do is they are a group of emergency physicians, pediatric emergency physicians, who do after-hours consults via telehealth. And so you have a senior pediatrician looking at your kids straight away. It's a really, really good resource. That could be a good way to go, okay? So I don't have the answers in this COVID time at the moment. I wish I did. It's just so hard. Yeah, so sorry, unfortunately. But okay. Now, and really, if your child, for example, you've got a toddler, here in COVID times, you're beginning a COVID swab. But if they had, a fever, but they were still eating and drinking well, they've got an obvious source for it. So they might have a really runny nose, and a bit of a cough. And you think, okay, you know what? They're actually okay. Of course, you'll be going and getting swabbed, but you may not need to take them to a doctor. What you may need is to be able to just give them, if they are miserable, some paracetamol or ibuprofen for you to, help if they're feeling uncomfortable. Make sure that they're keeping on drinking. But what we don't do, okay, and so this is one of the things that, when you are caring for your child at home who has a fever, is that we're not going to wrap them up in heaps of clothes or strip them off to nothing, okay? We're just going to keep them in loose, comfortable clothing, all right? So just keeping, we don't want them shivering and cold. We don't want them, if it is hot outside and you're hot and they're better off in just a nappy, then do that. So it's, what is it in the ambient temperature around you? Have a think about that. If it's 10 degrees outside, then, having them cold is probably not a good idea. All right. So just loose, appropriate, comfortable clothing. Okay. So they need to have lots and lots of fluids. All right. So keep up their fluids. We're going to give them more than normal. Their requirements are high. So being able to give more frequent breast feeds if necessary, being able to give them water if that's the age that they're at, or if they like it, oral rehydration solution is great as well. But that is all age appropriate, of course. And of course, what we don't do anymore, we're not going to put them in a cold bath. We're not going to sponge them down with tepid water and then put a fan on them. All of this is called active cooling, and active cooling isn't recommended. It's just about keeping them comfortable. Mind you, if, I know that my 12-year-old, if she has a fever, she really likes to have a cool face washer on the top of her head. It makes her feel better. She just likes it. Am I going to do it? Yes. Am I going to sponge her all over in tepid water and put a fan on her? No. Okay. So that's one of the comfort things that she just happens to like. So that's one thing that I will do. Okay. But if your child doesn't like it, don't do it. You don't need to force them to do it. All right. We are always going to see a doctor if your child is not improving, even if you have already seen one. We expect them to start to get better. If they are getting worse, not improving, then you need to see a doctor again. Okay. If the child's temperature goes on for more than a couple of days, you need to see, because what we want to know is what's causing it, okay? Remember, it's not about the fever, it's about what is causing it, and that's what we want to know, all right? So that's the important thing. And of course, if your child has a fever, you cannot send them to daycare or school. They are obviously fighting an infection, so it's really, really important that we keep them at home. Okay, not that here in New South Wales and Victoria at the moment we have a choice about that. They are home with us, but it's a really important thing. Now, remember, I'm going to put all of this with the fact sheet in the comments below. I'm also going to put our talk that we did about sepsis in the comments below, the one that I did with Children's Health Queensland. Tune in tomorrow as well to with the hints and tips and tricks from the pediatric doctor and nurse. Okay, but I'm going to go through some of the questions now. So Grace has said fever is so hard at the moment. Yes, this is what I was just talking about before. GP won't allow to come in to have his ears and throat checked when he has a fever to go to ED. I know, Grace, I wish I had the answers at the moment. It's really hard. You know, it is absolutely really hard. So it's just, it's hard. Now, Macy has asked, do you need a referral from a GP for cub care? You can get a referral from your GP, which subsidises some of the cost, but it is not necessary to have one, okay? So that's okay. So if you can get one from your GP, it's a great idea because that will subsidise some of the costs, but it is not 100% necessary to have a referral from your GP. You can just go onto their website. I'll put a link as well to their website down below. Now, remember, I am not sponsored or we don't get affiliations in any way from Cub Care. I just love what they do. I just think it's a really handy service. Okay. So, just making sure that you realise that. Okay. So, okay. Oh, it's hard. It's really hard at the moment. But in recap, I just want to just say, you know what? Do the best that you can. If you are in doubt, call Health Direct. Ask for help, Ask for advice. It's really important. And remember, fever is not the illness. It is simply the sign that body is fighting an infection. We don't need to get rid of the fever or bring it down. We only give paracetamol or ibuprofen for comfort if they need it. It's about finding out why they've got the fever. And remember, bubs under 3 months are absolutely, without a doubt, needing to see a doctor very quickly because they do not have the immune system that we do. Okay, so that's why. All right. Now, Andrea has just asked a question before we go. Andrea has said, sorry if I missed this, Heather. What's the best way to tell if a newborn has a fever? Can you tell by touch alone? So most people can. I read a study and it said that parent touch, they could tell that their child was warmer than usual. They couldn't exactly tell, you couldn't go, 38.6. No, couldn't do that. But they could tell that their child was warmer than usual. Andrea, what I'll get you to do is go back. I'm about to post this back onto her page. Go back, watch it from the beginning because I show you how to use a digital underarm thermometer, which in my opinion is the best for cost effectiveness and accuracy. Okay, so cost effectiveness and accuracy, digital underarm thermometer. Okay, all right. So there we go, everyone. I will hopefully see you tomorrow. You can tune into the CPR Kids page or the Baby to Toddler Show page or the Dr. Deb Levy page because we're going to be broadcasting out to all three of them and we're going to be talking about the hints and tips and tricks from giving a kid medicine to getting them to blow their nose and all sorts. Okay, it'll be fun. Thanks so much, everyone. I'll see you soon.